you want your food to go bad quickly because that means it's real food. So as minimal processing and as minimal preservatives that you can get away with as possible.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Food Matters podcast, your home for nutrition, health, and wellness education. My name is Laurentine. I am a filmmaker and a nutritionist and the founder of foodmatters.com, and I'm here to hold your hand on this journey to optimum health, transformation, and emotional healing. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited. We're doing another Food Matters podcast. And today I'm joined with my sister, Courtney Swan. So I'm really excited. This is a girl that has a heart like mine. She's following the mission and she's totally on it. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Courtney. Courtney is an integrative nutritionist and a real foodist on a mission to change the way America eats. After studying nutrition and integrative health, Courtney built her following through real foodology with a mission to educate and empower people to healthify their life. Courtney breaks through greenwashing and industry marketing to help us as consumers make better food choices while making the informative and digestible decisions how we navigate our supermarket. We love the work she does with her community through her real foodology social platform and podcast. So this conversation is going to reveal the secrets of the food industry, help you become a better and more confident consumer, and help you to start making better and more healthier food choices. So thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you for joining us today. I love talking on this topic, and I love that you're also an integrative nutritionist. So hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. I was actually just telling you this before we started recording, but I was so honored to come on this podcast because I found your documentary whenever it came out. I think it was about 10 years ago. And it was one of the things that really fueled me and sparked my fire to start doing all of this. So I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
That is so exciting. So yeah, Food Matters has been around for 17 years now. James and I started off with becoming documentary filmmakers, and then we decided to travel the world to raw food restaurants and media outlets to represent the brand and Food Matters story. And it's turned into a beautiful following and a community around the world that still remembers the story of back in the day of how we all first started. So thanks. That's really cool. So I'd love to hear your story and how you started out in this industry and what made you do what you currently do.
Yeah, so it was a progression of a bunch of different steps. I feel very fortunate that growing up, my mom was very into health. And so I grew up with a very healthy household. My mom was basically making everything from scratch. I mean, I remember my mom used to make pasta from scratch, bread from scratch. We were always shopping at the healthier food markets. And I was always the kid that was going over to my friends' houses, like looking at all their packaged foods, being like, oh my God, I don't have this at home. Like, what is this? Because I had all the off-brand, really healthy cereals. And I will admit at the time, I didn't understand and appreciate how well I had it. And then when I went to college, it was a complete 180. I went from eating every meal basically at home made from scratch by my mom to eating in the cafeteria, eating, fourth meal at Taco Bell, which I'm really ashamed of. I shouldn't say I'm ashamed, but I'm like, who is that person? But I did have to go through that phase to really see the difference in how I felt in my body, because I went growing up, never, ever getting sick, feeling really good, being really healthy. I get to college, I'm inflamed, I gain a bunch of weight. I don't understand why I have all this acne all of a sudden. I'm fatigued. I felt really sick, And so my mom started sending me books when I was in college. She would just mail me books, and she used to cut out little newspaper articles and literally would physically cut out the newspaper article and put it in the mail and mail it to me. And it just started slow. I know, it was so precious. And she was really on it from a very early time frame. And it just started to really spark an interest for me. And then in my undergrad, I took a nutrition course, and it was my last class of my last season at my school. It was almost like just an elective kind of class. And I remember being like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. So because it was my last class, I ended up I went and worked in music for 5 years. But while I was doing that, I started reading every book I could get my hands on and watching every documentary, which one of them was Food Matters. I found the work of Dr. Mark Hyman. I found Vani Hari, the Food Babe. Dr. Josh Axe, and I just could not get enough of it until I finally hit a point where I was like, I have to go back to school for this. So I left my career in music. I went and got my master's in nutrition, and I wanted it to be a more integrative, holistic approach just because I knew the meddling that was happening in some of the other programs with big food and how they really skew the education in one way to be really in favor of processed foods. And I mean, I really believe that's part of the reason why we're so confused today. We really shouldn't be that confused about what we should be eating. But I also, again, I understand why it's so confusing because there's so much marketing and, so much, there's a lot of budget behind it. But yeah, so I went back to school. And then while I was in school, I was so passionate about what I was learning. And I just I felt like so much of what I was learning. And I feel like maybe you probably feel similarly, that I felt like a lot of this I was learning, people didn't know. And I really felt like I needed to get it out there. I was like, people need to know this information because this is life changing. This is health giving information. And we're getting the wrong information from the mainstream media. And so I just felt like I needed an outlet to get all that out. And that's when I started Real Foodology. And then it started out as a food blog, and then it went into an Instagram, and now it's also a podcast.
Yeah, girl, I totally dig it. I totally get it. That was our main motivation as well. When James and I first studied nutrition, we realized that this was information that wasn't taught to us in schools. This was not something that, our parents generally tell us. Even our doctors, when we have 15 minutes in the general practitioner office, we don't know and get taught any of these things. So we were like, wait, we can't just become nutritionists and do one-on-one sessions. We need to get this information to more people. And I guess like then we're creating a documentary, or we want to create podcasts, and we wanted to get information out there. And I feel like one of the biggest parts of studying integrative nutrition was that we didn't just learn about how to treat the symptoms. We learned about how to treat the cause, right? Treating the cause and healing the body and learning about different lifestyle options. So let's go back to, our audience knows this sort of stuff, but it's so nice to really hear it from someone like yourself again and to really reiterate this. What is wrong with our food industry and how is it making us sick?
Yeah.
It's a big question, but it's important to talk about.
It's very multifaceted. A lot of it comes down to money. I think the biggest issue that we have right now is that there's a misunderstanding that just because it's on the shelf, that it's okay and that it's healthy and that it's good for us to eat. I don't think people understand how, at least in the United States, I know there's varying degrees of it in different countries. But I know that the corruption is everywhere. It just depends on what country you're in, depending on what regulations they have. But food, for the most part, these food-like products are made with dollar signs in mind, not the health of the people. And then, of course, there's a lot of confusion around marketing. I mean, I kind of said this a minute ago, but it's these companies spend billions of dollars in marketing. I don't know how it is where you are. You're in Australia, right? Yeah. So in the US, there's 11 companies that own the entirety of our food system. It's 11 companies. So if you think about that massive wealth that's there and the amount of money they have to spend on marketing, no wonder everyone's so confused. Everyone's very confused on what to choose, what to eat, because we are being told that these food-like products are healthy for us, they're good for us. And no wonder everyone's confused, And then on top of that, we have the government paying subsidies to farmers to grow certain foods. And this is how we keep the cost of some of these foods down really cheap. But unfortunately, what's happened is all of our processed foods are cheap. So when you look at the back of a package, it'll say most likely contains, or it says contains corn, wheat, and soy. It says it on almost every single package. And that's because we're paying subsidies. We're paying our own tax dollars to then have the farmers grow this and then make it cheaper. But the problem is we don't actually know what the true cost of food is. And, on top of that too, we're not educating that food is life-giving. Food should be something that we should be spending more money on. It should be something that we should be budgeting and prioritizing. And I understand and I want to respect that everyone has different budgets, but this should be the first and foremost thing before we're buying TVs and cars and shoes and expensive designer bags. I mean, this is literally what's giving us life, but we have been told that it needs to be fast, cheap, and convenient. Because now all of a sudden food has been, eating has become this inconvenience that we need to fix and make it cheaper and faster. And so I think a lot of people have started to become, have started to expect having this cheap, fast processed food. And then, we have a lot of senators also and politicians that are creating laws around our food production without having any sort of notion around health and nutrition. So I would say those are really our biggest issues that we have. And then because of that, we don't have a lot of laws protecting pesticides being sprayed on food, antibiotics and hormones being given to animals, the way that we're growing our food, how we're destroying our soil. I mean, there's a lot happening right now.
Thank you so much for bringing all of these things. These are all macro issues, but they're all trickle down to micro issues, and they're really hurting our society, our children, and and mothers, and especially now the statistics showing 200 man-made chemicals in umbilical cords of newborn babies. Just to get into this world, we're already brought in with so many toxins. So we need to be so aware of this. We need to be so, I think awareness is the first thing, and then also educating ourselves on this. Could you explain the term of greenwashing and what people are doing in the grocery stores and how we can avoid this?
Yeah, so this is something I like to talk about a lot because going back to that marketing budget, basically what greenwashing is a company will try to trick the consumer into thinking that a packaged food is healthy. Often what happens is the package will be green, it will depict hens, frolicking in pastures, maybe cows grazing in pastures. On the front of the package, it depicts a very healthy scene. But you have to always look at the back of the package because that's really what the truth is, because the front is really not regulated for the most part. It's there's a couple little regulations around it, but for the most part, it's really not regulated. And a company can pretty much say whatever they want on the front. Like they can say, this is natural, this is healthy. There's no regulation around the term natural. There's no regulation around healthy. Literally a company could basically sell us like cow poop and say, this is healthy and this is natural. So you have to look at the back. So you read the ingredients on the back. And that's why I always tell people, I'm like, don't be duped by the front of the package. Make sure you read the ingredients. And one of my rules for reading the ingredients, this is how you know if this is something that's healthy for you or you need to put it back on the shelf. If all of those ingredients you recognize and they're something that you could buy in the store. So let's say, it's like coconut flour and olive oil and, chia seeds or whatever. You're like, oh, I know all these ingredients. I could buy all these and I could technically make it at home, but you don't have to, then that would be something I would say fair game. But if you're looking at this package and you're thinking, what the heck is TBHQ and where would I source this? Like, where would I buy this? That's when you want to put it back on the shelf.
And is there anything that you could help our viewers with? What specific ingredients to look out for as well when we are shopping?
Yeah, so I would say first and foremost, look out for things like inflammatory oils. Canola oil is a really big one. I'm seeing sunflower oil pop up more, safflower oil, corn oil, soybean oil. There was actually a study recently that came out showing that soybean oil reduces oxytocin in the brain. So it's literally having an effect on our brains, which is very scary. You want to look for things with avocado oil and olive oil. I would say olive oil is number one, and then avocado oil is another great one. Or just really good healthy fats too. You want to be looking for things with butter, beef tallow. Beef tallow is really making a comeback right now, at least here in the United States. I would also look out for corn syrup. Corn syrup is a corn-based sweetener that is being linked to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and we think it's one of the main drivers of obesity. Another one is preservatives. Anything like I just mentioned, like TBHQ is a known preservative that's linked to gastro upset, and there's inflammatory markers and some other like more serious diseases that are connected to this this preservative that we put in our food. Artificial flavorings, I would say, would be another really big one. Artificial dyes is a really big one to look out for too, because all of these too, you have to think about, you want your food to go bad quickly because that means it's real food. You want it to go bad within a couple of days. You don't want a loaf of bread that's not going to mold and it's going to sit on your kitchen counter for 6 months without doing anything. That's gross because that means that it has a ton of preservatives in there and they're going to have a lot of effect on your body. So as minimal processing and as minimal preservatives that you can get away with as possible. There's some natural preservatives that are better, but anything that's unnatural, any of these like preservatives or emulsifiers, what I would try to stay away with or stay away from. Natural flavors is another one. Refined sugar is a really big one too. And this would be corn syrup, any sort of forms of white sugar, Even when you find like juice concentrate is still a form of a lot of sugar. I would look for cleaner ones like coconut sugar or maybe stevia and monk fruit sweetened stuff. Maple syrup is a really good one. Honey is a really good one, but try to stay away from all the white sugars.
So I love the topic of what you're talking about of that our food needs to be able to mold, it needs to be able to rot, it needs to be able to have a shelf life. And that takes us to a point where, okay, we can't eat this anymore. And I remember I'm from Holland originally, and whenever I travel through Europe and you go to like the Spanish markets or the French markets, people shop for the day. Like you go and you make your day around, traveling to, you work and travel close up to a market, and you have a fresh produce market where you go and buy your food for that evening, and the food is very perishable. You look at, and I know that a lot of my friends in Holland and in France, they're really skilled in looking for how to look for something, that's ripe, or that is it rotting, or is it, like how have we lost this skill? Like this is an ancient skill that we've had to look at produce and go, is this going to, how long is this going to last? Or is this a good product? Or how to like judge a pear, or how to judge a pawpaw or a papaya to see if it's ripe. A lot of us have lost those wisdoms, right? And that's because we're not shopping for the day. Like we're shopping for a week. We, pack everything into a giant shopping trolley. We pay a bulk bill, and then we take it all home and hopefully store it into our pantries, and it all fits. It's like, but one of the things we're forgetting is that really our body works with natural foods. Our body works with whole foods, and our body works with living foods. So you're saying, like we're looking for packages and we're looking for all these numbers and numbers and preservatives. But really what we should be doing is like, how fresh is our produce, and how do we tell how fresh it is? So let's go back to our consumer, and that's what we're doing here. We're educating our consumer. When you go into the supermarket, what are the sort of, okay, the top things that you look for? I mean, I love that you were talking about the oils. Should we talk about food colorings and these type of artificial flavors? Because they're, in my opinion, they're the dangers for our children's health. So
Yeah.
what do we be careful for? Like if you see a certain type of numbers and numbers and colors, what do we look for?
Yeah, so I only know the ones how to name them in the US. I have seen the ones in London, like in the UK, where they have like the E in front of it and it's a different number. So I wouldn't be able to name them out specifically, but I know like in the US, for example, it's red 40, yellow number 5, yellow number 6. Like there's just all these different. It's very obvious to know. Like they'll all kind of look like that, and then similarly in the UK, it'll have like an E in front of it and then some numbers. That's when you know that those are the artificial dyes. And I'm right there with you. I think the artificial dyes and the artificial flavors are some of the biggest concerns. And for a couple of reasons. First of all, with the dyes, why are we dyeing our food? It doesn't matter. It serves no nutritional purpose whatsoever. All it does is harm our bodies. There is no reason that our food needs to be a specific color. So that's the first thing is I'm like, we're not getting any nutritional value out of this. And then with the flavoring, we're now masking food's true flavors. And I think what's happening here and why we've been adding these flavorings is because this food that we're preserving and we're stripping down of all of its nutrients, it's getting processed so much that it's devoid of any flavor that it would normally have when it's in nature. And so now we're having to replace it with these artificial food flavorings, and we don't know what real food tastes like anymore, which is a problem because it's messing with our palates. And I always tell people this, I'm like, just do your best to pull out as many processed foods as you can. The more you pull out, the more you're going to realize that your palate completely changes. This actually happened to me a couple months ago. I was at a movie with my boyfriend, and when I was a kid, so like a long time ago, there was this one candy that I loved getting at the movie theater. It was called Reese's Pieces. And we were seeing a showing of a film, so they're handing out free candy, and they hand me a box of Reese's Pieces, and I was like, oh my god, I would actually just love to see what these taste like. I haven't had one in probably 20 years, seriously. I had one, and I was like, I almost spit it out, and I'm not even being dramatic. My palate has changed so much that it tasted so fake to me that I was like, this does not even taste remotely good to me because it tastes so fake. And if you've ever been to the farmer's market and you have tried like a fresh peach or a fresh tomato, like just picked right from the land and grown like with so much care, with healthy soil, nothing compares to the taste of real food. And we're now masking these dead foods with these food like processed flavorings,
Yeah.
and we don't even know what the taste of real food is anymore.
Right. It's so, so true. And we're getting our children used to the taste of lollies or the taste of artificial foods. And then obviously the palate changes, and then they're no longer craving the plum or the
Yeah.
fresh fig or the apricot. You know, they're like, well, that doesn't taste real for me anymore. Like, I'd rather have the Skittles, or I'd rather have the, the Redskin, or that's an Australian thing. But yeah, I would really like to know more about, let's go deeper into this, because I really want people to realize the dangers of this, okay? Because we're seeing now a huge incidence of ADHD children. We're seeing
Mhm.
a lot of people, even kids, being diagnosed a lot earlier in life with learning difficulties, learning disabilities, even not being able to concentrate or focus, or walking out of the classroom. My boy goes to a class and he's like, there's 2 or 3 kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD, and they're allowed to just walk out of the classroom, or they're okay with disrupting the teacher.
Mm.
And well, I asked them, what do they eat for lunch? Like, what type of foods do they have in their lunchbox, just out of interest? And here their parents, perhaps unknowingly, providing for them, and they're on medication, all sorts of lollies, pastries, different
Mm.
types of colorings, even those little, the cereals, that Frosties, and the colored cereals with the
Yes.
blue dye in it. And I'm like, these kids already have a diagnosis. Like, they really should be looking at what sort of food they're eating, and especially cutting down on sugars. So, could you lead into perhaps what parents should be looking out for when their children are either dealing with these type of neuro disabilities, or those parents that are wanting to avoid those products, and how they can best avoid that?
Yeah, well, and I do want to say really quickly, what you brought up is a really good point, and it's something that's really concerning to me because when you look at the statistics, the amount of children that are being diagnosed with various diseases at such a young age, or disabilities, or whatever it is, when you really look at the numbers, and then you also look at the majority of these can either be lessened or completely avoided altogether with diet and lifestyle changes, we're not really understanding the full scope and effect of what we put in our body and how it's going to manifest in our bodies. And then on top of that, when we're giving these kids these food like products, these foods are designed to be addictive for a reason. Because again, like I
Mm,
said earlier, these companies, I mean, they literally have someone on staff whose main job is to make it as addictive as possible. They have something called a bliss point, and all of these companies want to hit this bliss point, which is like the perfect, it's like the Goldilocks of taste. It's like the perfect mixture of fat, salt, and sweet that gets you absolutely addicted. It lights all the neurons on in your brain. And now we do know that sugar has a massive effect on the brain. We've seen it. There's been a lot of studies, and how addictive it is, also how it turns on certain neurons in your brain, the same ones that certain drugs turn on. I mean, we know that sugar is a drug, and we're not recognizing it as a society and going, we need to take better care of our children, because we're essentially giving them drugs every single day, and then wondering why they're bouncing off the walls, why they're having learning disabilities. And then I will
mm,
say, in the UK specifically, they banned these dyes because there is a direct link with hyperactivity in children and these dyes. So I would say, number one, parents should be looking out for the dyes. I would say, as much as possible, buying whole real foods for your children is always going to be better, and it's the difference of opening up a can and pouring out, the peaches and the syrup juice or whatever, and just getting a whole peach and just chopping it up. It's really not that much harder. And in the long run, it's going to serve your child's life so much more, because they're not going to be bouncing off the walls. They're going to get real nutrition. Because the problem is with these food like products, our body is not recognizing it as true nutrition. So our body doesn't really know what to do with it. And so
mm.
essentially what's happening with these learning disabilities and everything, with them bouncing off the walls, it's essentially their body going, oh, we don't know what to do with this. Like, this is not real food. And it's symptoms. It's, our body always tells us that our body always gives us symptoms. And when something's wrong, it's our responsibility to go, okay, we need to like tune into this and figure out what's going on and try to link it back. So I would say lessen processed foods as much as you can. What defines a processed food? So maybe we go there. Um, More specifically, I want to say hyper processed foods. because a
Mm-hmm.
processing of a food can literally mean something as simple as, picking a peach and cutting it up. That would be considered like very minimally processed. But when we're talking about like packaged processed foods that you want to avoid, I would say hyper processed foods, meaning that when you look at the back of the ingredients, your grandparents wouldn't even recognize this as real food. Your grandparents would probably go, "What is this? We never grew up with this. We've never eaten this." And then again, what I said is when you go back and look at those ingredients, you go, "Okay, I can't buy all these ingredients at the grocery store, so this doesn't belong in the human body." So those would be considered hyper processed foods. Hyper processed foods would be, I'm trying to think of an example of what you guys would have over there. Um, like a candy bar, or like, I don't know if you guys have Twinkies. I always use Twinkies as a great example because you look at that and you're like, what even is this? There's no
Why would
resemblance of
you do
food.
this to yourself? Exactly. This is not food.
Exactly, exactly. Whereas, like, for example, if you buy crackers and they're made with, sprouted organic um, grains, and sea salt and maybe some spices, I would consider that to be minimally processed and that's okay to eat. It's the problem
Mm-hmm.
is when you have the dyes and the artificial flavorings and the all the different preservatives, emulsifiers, hydrogenated oils. When we just start adding all this stuff in there is the problem.
And so many times as well, I see, like you were saying, like these food industry, like there's marketing behind it, right? And the other day I wanted to buy a pack of chips or something. I wanted a snack, right? We all get hungry sometimes, and it was a road market. And I went inside and I wanted to buy a snack, like something healthy. And I bought these peas, like, the green peas with salt on it
Yeah.
and like a little chili powder. And I looked at the ingredients. I started eating it and I looked at the ingredients and I looked at like one of the ingredients was blue number two. No,
Oh,
blue number four. And I was thinking to myself, obviously peas, when you have them dehydrated, maybe over time they start to turn their color into less green. So they wanted to like turn it into like a bigger, brighter green. And so they wanted to use the food color or the food dyes. And I thought
mm,
to myself, here is an industry, right, that thrives on people wanting to buy it because it needs to look pretty. It needs to look like a green pea. So let's just put some food coloring in there, but also damaging our health. And this is typically like what we're talking about, right? Like sometimes we think we're buying something healthy. I'm like, oh, I'm buying healthy green peas. But no, this is why we check these packages, because then there's hidden ingredients in there, and there's hidden food dyes, there's hidden preservatives and sort of flavors and colors. So thank you for addressing that, and thank you for allowing us as parents to be more vigilant and to have more awareness about what exactly the food industry is really trying to do. Because if we didn't know about the marketing companies, that they really don't have the best interest to us, then we would just be buying it on face value.
yeah. Yeah, and look, I want to be really sensitive because I know this can be a really sensitive topic. I don't ever want anyone to feel ashamed or feel guilty for what they've been doing because this is not your fault. I genuinely believe every parent is doing the best that they absolutely can do. They really think that they're doing well for their kid. And that's a lot of the reason why I started Real Foodology, because to me, I feel this like it's wrong. It's wrong what's happening right now because we're taking advantage of people who are just trying to feed their families, who are just trying to do their best, and like basically telling them, "Oh, this is really healthy for you," and it's not because they're cutting corners. They want to put these preservatives and food dyes in there so that it can sit longer on the shelf, so that they can make more money. Because the faster it goes bad, the faster they have to sell it, or they lose that product and they lose the money. And it's a hard job for them to meet in the middle there, but also like we have to do what's best for our families. And unfortunately, all these preservatives and food dyes are not doing us any good. And you just reminded me when you were talking about how peas, if you dehydrate them, and they're not going to be that bright green anymore. This is also part of the problem, is that the food industry has tricked us into thinking that food has to be perfect, bright, with no
Yes.
spots in it, like glossy. I mean, every time you go to the grocery store, I encourage everyone listening, take note of every time you go and you see every single apple is like perfectly round, the same exact shape, has the same gloss,
Shiny, bright.
shiny. And then you go to the farmer's market and you're like, there's like apples stuck to other apples and one has an arm and like weird spots and whatever. But that's literally how it exists in nature. And that's how food looks. We've overprocessed it to a point, and then we've trained humans to now think that food has to be absolutely perfect, shiny, round, the same shape every time, but that's not how it looks in nature. And so now we're dyeing things, and we have to take our power back and know food doesn't have to be that perfect. It doesn't have to be this bright green. And I mean, and sometimes it is, right? Like that's where some of the health benefits are in those colors, but it doesn't always have to be the exact same every single time. But that's what the industry has done is they've made it into like every single thing, every single package looks exactly the same.
So true. And thank you so much for highlighting that. And like, you're right. It's not our fault. It's not the parents' fault. We are trying to do our best. We're trying to eat healthy. We're trying to put the most healthiest food in front of our kids. At the same time, we know that some kids are not going to eat a broccoli, or they're not going to necessarily go for a Brussels sprout, so it's how, this is maybe a question for you. How can we as parents, healthify the foods that are current, like in the current arena of what we have as options? How can we healthify our options that are available to us, and where do we start?
Okay, I have a couple little tricks for this. I was actually a nanny for a really long time, and this is what I used to do. So I would say, first and foremost, as much as you can, involve your kids in the kitchen because the more involved they are, and the more hands they have on it, the more pride they have in eating whatever it is that they created. So if you can really get them in there, like have them help pour things in and help them cook, like chop or whatever it is, depending on what their age is and what they're able to do, but the more involved they are, the more willing and excited they're going to be about eating those foods that maybe they wouldn't normally be as excited about. I also have a really dear friend who has 3 kids, and she's I don't know actually know what her title is, maybe a dietitian, but she talks about this all the time. And she said, with your kids, you have to understand that the first time introducing them to something, they're probably not going to like it. You have to keep trying because it's about
Mm.
maybe the fifth or sixth time that you introduce them, like broccoli or whatever it is, then they start coming around to it. It just takes them a minute with their palates, with textures. So you have to be willing and patient to introduce things more than once. Another hack that I really liked when I was nannying is I would sneak things in. So I used to make tomato sauce and throw like spinach or kale and maybe like broccoli, and then I would just I would pulverize it. I'd blend it so they didn't even know that it was in the sauce, and they ate it up like crazy. They never even knew. Like poured it over pasta, and then I was sitting over there being like, "Haha, you don't even know you're eating your broccoli too." So you can do little things like that where you can kind of sneak it in so they don't know. And then another thing too is make their food fun if you can and you have time. One of my favorite things is I used to make, I called it healthy Lunchables, which I don't know if you guys know what Lunchables are, but they're like these processed packaged little boxes, in the United States at least, that come with really nasty deli meat that has like nitrates and doesn't come from good places, and the meat is really not great, and processed cheese, processed crackers. So what I would do is I would make her these healthy little Lunchables where I would cut up little pizza crusts and give her sauce and give her cheese and little pepperonis, and she would make her own little like personal pizza, like Lunchable pizzas. And so when you do little things like that where the kid feels involved and like it's kind of fun for them, and I would take little cookie cutters sometimes and like make the pizza crust into little like butterflies or things like that. So anything you can kind of get creative with kids and make it fun for them, that's definitely really helpful. And then you know what too? I think people don't we don't always think about this with kids. Kids are way more, they're paying attention way more than we realize. And if you can help them understand, really understand
Mhm.
why we do this and why they should care. And at first they may not get it, or they may roll their eyes, they may not want to listen. But my mom did this with me and it worked. Over time, she just would slowly, tell me little things like, we really do this because it nourishes our bodies, and in any way that you can make them feel empowered about the choices that they're making and feel good about the choices and encourage them to make these choices knowing that it's doing really good for their body and their health. It's never too young to start talking to them about that.
I love that. And what about for adults? So we're going in the supermarket. We know the aisles that we normally shop in, and it's usually I guess, the packaged aisles. What sort of shopping strategies could we do, and what sort of changes could we make to our shopping habits to start greening and healthifying our diets in general for people looking for changing healthy options?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first and foremost, try to get the majority of your groceries from the peripheral of the grocery stores, meaning, try to get the majority of your calories and your foods from whole real foods. So from the produce aisle, from the meat section, from the dairy section, start there and then work your way into the more like packaged foods. And try to limit the amount of packages that you buy, but then also remember that we're not here to vilify packaged foods. I know that they serve a purpose. We live in the modern world. I'm a realist. I'm like, okay, it's people are busy, people are working a lot of, working long hours, we have kids, like I get it. So we sometimes have to buy things in packages, but just look for the packages that are made with really simple ingredients. I think we're very blessed and lucky to live in a time where a lot of food industry or a lot of food companies have started making cleaner products because they understand one, the effects of these highly hyper processed foods that are having on our body, and they're also understanding that consumers don't want all that crap in there anymore. So there are companies that are creating really clean, crackers and healthier for you cereals. And so I would start just being vigilant about reading the ingredients on the back. And once again, just if there's an ingredient in there that you're like, I don't know what this is and I wouldn't know where to buy this, just put that back on the shelf and look in that same section. So if you pick up a pack of crackers and you're like, ooh, I don't really recognize a lot of these ingredients. Like, what is this? Look at other ones and compare and say, okay, you know what, this one actually has all real ingredients and they use rosemary as a preservative instead of, TBHQ or whatever the preservative is. So we definitely have options. I would say too, I think sometimes people feel a little bit nervous about cooking and maybe want to buy more packaged stuff because they feel more comfortable doing that. We live in such an amazing time where you can go on YouTube and you can watch people make recipes. You can go on Instagram and watch reels. And it doesn't have to be this like extravagant, like Martha Stewart 4-course meal. It can be something really, really simple that you make make at home. And you may find that you really enjoy it too.
I love that. Thank you so much for that encouragement. It's so true, isn't it? And shopping around the periphery, it's so true. Like sometimes we're so used to just going straight into the middle aisle and you know where your chips are and you know where your, burger ingredients are and you know where your soft drinks are. But what about if we venture out and, use the periphery first and then start to fill up from the middle? Cool. I love that.
Yeah. And if people ever feel discouraged, because I know with grocery shopping, a lot of people can feel really discouraged, maybe feel overwhelmed. Find someone who you really like, either get a cookbook or go online and go to their website. And just, this is what I really love to do before I go to the farmer's market. I'll go to one of my favorite creators' websites and I'll look at a bunch of recipes and go, oh my gosh, that looks really good. That looks really good. And I'll make a little like list of things that I want to make for the week. And then I use that as like what ingredients I'm going to buy either at the grocery store or at the farmer's market. And then it makes it more fun. And then you're not just at the grocery store just grabbing random things like, oh, this looks good, that looks good. And you'll find that you buy a lot less packaged foods just that way because you're buying these whole real foods that then you're having to put into the recipes at home.
That makes so much sense. And so what about for those that do want to turn their packaged foods into homemade meals? What are the easiest ones? Let's say the easiest ones that you can think of that you normally buy in a package that you could try to start making at home and do your own homemade one.
Yeah, let's see. I would say soups. Soups are so easy to make. So simple.
True, huh? Like so many times you buy them in a tin or you buy them in a package or you buy them pre-made.
And I will tell you, they always taste better when you make them from scratch. They just do. There's just something about it. And you'll probably end up making a lot more. So then you'll have more to share or you'll have leftovers. So it ends up being a lot more budget friendly as well. I would say like I don't know if you guys have Hamburger Helper, but those like prepackaged kind of like pasta with like a sprinkle powdered sauce on top kind of thing. Again, like that's something that's super simple that you could make at home. You just boil the pasta, get a couple of spices, look up again. And, because it totally depends. Everyone's taste is so different. So find just know what you really like to eat and then go and find some simple recipes that you can kind of copycat and recreate. I'm trying to think of other packaged foods. What are some other things that people buy and pack? I don't know because I feel like I'm out of practice of that.
Even just thinking about cereals or, like the mueslis or even just the grab and go bars. Like sometimes I look at them and I'm like, wow, they're so full of sugar. They always have to be coated with chocolate or sugar on top. And I'm like, I just want something natural or just something that, when you get really hungry, you just want to grab a whole bunch of nuts. And sometimes I just do that as well. I soak a whole bunch of nuts and then put it in the oven, sprinkle even some cinnamon. Cinnamon is really good for that as well. Cinnamon and a little bit of maple and some salt. and just let them roast for a little bit. And then you always have these nuts to grab into and just, snack on when you're hungry.
Yeah, that's a great one too. And that's so simple. You can make a huge batch and it lasts you a couple weeks. I mean, my mom does this with her granola. My mom makes a huge batch of granola and she'll store it in the freezer and then bring it out time and time. And honestly, I know it sounds weird, but I've eaten it like out of the freezer before and I'm like, this tastes really good, and it lasts for a long time. So, I know a lot of us are on budgets and we're concerned about, spending too much money on food. And this is a great way because you can make a massive batch of granola and leave it in the freezer. And let me tell you, nothing has ever tasted better to me in my life than my mom's homemade granola. Like, I'm sorry, but no packaged granola will ever taste the same.
Courtney, coming to the end of this interview, I just wanted to ask one more question on the viewers and how we can get in touch with you and your work. And what is the best place that we can ask questions and that you can hopefully reply to?
Yeah, thank you so much. I would say I'm the most active on Instagram. So if you guys want to find me at Real Foodology, so it's like the science of real food. So at Real Foodology on Instagram. I also have a podcast. So if you guys want to dive in deeper, you can check me out on every podcast network. And I'm a little bit on TikTok, but mostly Instagram, I would say, in the podcast. So.
Okay, Courtney. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a great interview. And our listeners, I know I personally did as well, would have learned so much out of this. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge, and especially all the work that you do in trying to, you're like an undercover investigator. So thank you so much for scrutinizing the foods that we have in our supermarkets and bringing some awareness to all of these packaged foods. So thank you again for your time. And hope to meet you in person soon.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So yes, thank you everyone for listening. I really enjoyed that talk. I hope you did too. And there will be more of these on the Food Matters podcast. So head to foodmatters.com and see you again.